Hey kids, it's me, Kevin Smith. 5 years ago, I had a massive widowmaker heart attack. I don't know if you heard about it. Of course you did, because I would not stop talking about it for 5 years. It was the most exciting thing that ever happened to me since Clerks. And we're going to do that again, because I just went through a thing that I think a lot of people go through, but nobody ever talks about. So I'm going to give you some details, and hopefully it'll be useful in your own life, okay? Here we go. For the last month, I have been at a mental health facility. In the, parlance of our times, I went crazy. I lost my marbles. I had a complete break with reality and became very dissociative. This next section is about sexual abuse. When I was 6 years old, there was a kid a little older than me, 9 or 10. I don't know who he was, because I grew up in a summer town and people were kind of transient in the summertime particularly. So I don't know who this kid is. I see his face very clearly. Never saw him again after this incident. Took me, and I was 6 years old, and a friend of mine, whose name I won't disclose, but she was a 6-year-old girl, and made us put our mouths on each other's genitalia. The other kid, the older kid, was going to make us put our mouths on him, and then an adult walked past. It was an alleyway behind an apartment building. It was sheer white walls, so there were no windows next to us, only on the second floor. And on the other side of us was a fence that had grape leaves covering it. So unless you walk right past the alley, you never would have known what happened. You wouldn't even seen us. And luckily, some adult did walk past the alley. It was like, what's going on? And chased those kids away. And then I went home and never said anything because I was scared and humiliated and ashamed. And, I was a Catholic kid, so I was like, God, and worried about sin and whatnot, and never told anybody about it. I've told the story in my life to other people, but always presented thusly. Oh, I played doctor when I was a kid. Recently, when I was at a facility called Tucson in Arizona, mental health facility that literally saved my life. I was talking to my trauma therapist, Kelly Parks, and I told her this story. And she stops me dead. We were walking around the track, and she goes, Kevin, that's sexual abuse. And I said, no, it's not. We were playing doctor. And she goes, doctor is, I'll show you mine, you show me yours. If there's a third party instructing you what to do and it's against your will, that's sexual abuse. And so blew my mind. And I was like, why my whole life have I thought I was playing doctor? And Kelly said, because it was a traumatic event. Something insanely traumatizing happened to you. And in order to live with that, in order to survive after something like that, your coping mechanism was to minimize it, to make it small, to make it, we just played doctor. Perhaps because later in life, I heard of other people getting abuse, or sexual abuse became more talked about. And since it didn't sound like other stories I heard, I was able to keep it small. And that's what we do. Everyone suffers trauma and then tries to keep it small in order to survive. It's a survival mechanism. Everybody suffers trauma on a regular basis. It's a process where the amygdala in the brain goes into protection mode in order to protect the mind, in order to protect the body. You might have heard of the term fight or flight, the fight or flight response. There's also two others that they've added. There's fight, there's flight, there's freeze, and there's fawn. Freeze is something that happened to me at age 6. The amygdala is crazy, man. It's in your brain. It's the lizard brain part of you. It's the thing that protects you your entire life. And it's what reacts to trauma, as does the human nervous system. So when I was in Tucson, at first, I didn't really want to talk about the traumas that I suffered. And I got to stop doing that, because they are traumas, because I felt they were small. I was in a facility where they also had veterans, members of a program called Red, White, and Blue, men and women who have been overseas, been in service and seen action, and suffer from PTSD and other afflictions. And when you sit in a room with somebody telling a story about being in battle and gunshots and things blowing up and friends dying, you tend to shrink yourself and not want to say what your trauma is because, well, mine's real small compared to that. Here's the news. The human nervous system doesn't recognize levels of trauma. It doesn't equivocate. The human nervous system doesn't go like, well, that's a little trauma, so that's okay. That's a big trauma, so we'll deal with that. The same traumatic effect of having a kid in an alleyway say, put your mouth on that person, is the same traumatic effect of nearly getting hit by a car, the same traumatic effect of being mocked in a classroom in front of people, the same traumatic effect of having a gun put into your face. There are no levels when it comes to trauma. Trauma is trauma. So I know as people watch, they're like, well, that's small compared to like what other people have gone through. That's patently not true. It's scientifically not true. Trauma is trauma. So case in point, when I was 9, my grandmother died, my father's mom, my grandfather died, my mom's dad. My father was in a massive car accident. He almost died. And my mom was in the hospital. And this was all in the span of like 4 months. As kids in the 70s, there wasn't a lot of, hey, be careful. They didn't treat children like Fabergé eggs. They treated kids like kids in the 70s, which is like, you can handle this. Growing up, I grew up in an era when if you cried, people would be like, I'll give you something to cry about. There wasn't a lot of nurturing and understanding and stuff. So when I'm 9, I'm in 4th grade, and my 4th grade teacher, who shall remain nameless, said something that shaped the rest of my life. In 4th grade, we stand up to do the Pledge of Allegiance in the morning. And after that, since it was a Catholic school, Our Lady of Perpetual Help, we also did the Morning Angelus, which is a prayer they do in church, Catholic church. And my teacher is walking around the room and comes to a stop right next to me. I'm standing and she's standing right here, and she's taller. Of course, I was little. And I felt her looking at me. Like I felt her eyes boring into me. And finally, before I sit down at my desk, I look up at my 4th grade teacher. And my 4th grade teacher, who was a woman in her 50s, looks down at me with the most abject disgust in her face and says, ugh, the gut on you, Mr. Smith. Saying that in front of a room full of your peers, someone who's, meant to be caring for you and somebody you respect because that's the teacher, devastated a kid who didn't have the tools prepared for that. I'm sure there are people like, you think that's bad? I've been through worse. That's called playing Trauma Olympics. I'm sure people have been through horrible things, way more horrible than that. But the central nervous system reacts the exact same way in everybody. Trauma is trauma. Remember that. The next incident that happened very closely to that was we were all at the Long Branch water slide and going up and down and having a blast. It was the early summer. And 4th time up to the top of the water slide, there's a teenager who sits at the top and is like, stop, go, stop, go. So the people going down the slide don't pile up on each other. And the kid, random teenager, stops and goes, stop. Pregnant ladies can't ride the slide. Sounds minimal. And even now, I want to discount it. I want to bring it down. I want to be like, oh, that's not as bad as ... But again, trauma is trauma. Now, I'm going to take you from those 3 incidences, 1 at 6 and 2 at 9, into the present and show you how it shaped the rest of my life. A 6-year-old kid who was terrified of being told to do something that was completely foreign to him, was directed to do something that disturbed his core values. Guess what that little kid grew up to be? A director. Because nobody's ever going to do that to me again. I'm going to be in charge for the rest of my life. Nobody's ever going to tell me to do something I don't want to do. The stuff that happened at 9 ties directly into the body dysmorphia I've had my entire life. I have always seen myself, and even now, I see myself as disgusting. I see myself the way my fourth grade teacher, I don't want to give her name, saw me. That look on her face and the thing that she said must be true. Here's an adult who is in charge of me, who I spend 5-6 hours a day with. So if she's saying it, this has to be true. Now, that's not part of my core values. That's part of my core beliefs. Your core values are immutable. They come to you in childhood, your parents instill them and whatnot. And even as you grow, you can add more, they're what you stand for, what you believe in. Your core beliefs are completely different. That's the truth or the untruth that you tell yourself constantly. So my entire life, I've seen myself the way my fourth grade teacher saw me, the way the teenager at the top of the water slide saw me. And, those of you who have seen me over the years, I've had a lifelong battle with my weight that's gone up and down. At top weight, I was 330 pounds. Today, I stand here at 180 pounds. But 150 pounds later, gone, I still see a fat 9-year-old kid because that's all those two people saw. And I minimize that my entire life, as people are doing as they watch this right now. Like, I was called fat when I was a kid. Well, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry that happened to you. And I hope it didn't affect you the way that it affected me deeply and shaped who I became. Literally, sometimes physically shaped who I became. I became a people pleaser. The kind of person that will be anything you need him to be and do anything you want him to do. Just don't call me fat. Just don't recognize how disgusting and repugnant I am. Let me distract you with jokes and entertainment. So at age 9, I start building, for lack of a better description, that Kevin Smith, the public presentational version of myself. I refer to him affectionately as the other guy. I started building the other guy because no one's ever going to say something like that to me again. I'll beat them to it. Like, you can't call me fat because I'm going to call myself fat first. The other guy got me all the way through grammar school, through high school, all the way up into my early 20s until I fell in love with film and suddenly realized that, maybe I can make some art or something. Now, this much I know. Me, the authentic Kevin Smith, made Clerks, not the other guy. The other guy came online as an adult once Clerks was accepted and bought. I was 23. I made a little black and white movie with my friends, the first thing I ever made. The human brain doesn't stop growing till age 26. So to this unformed brain full of self-esteem issues and self-loathing is introduced a world going, hey, we like what you did. That was great. I mean, this is something that happened back in high school and grade school as well. Anytime I was on stage and performing, people clap, people laugh, and nobody was saying, ew, you're disgusting, you're fat. So I leaned into that very heavily. And in September, something happened in my life right before we were about to start the convenience tour, Clerks 3 convenience tour. And we had like a 94% sell-through or something like that, and 52 cities to go to with thousands of people to see. And I didn't have time to take care of my mental health. I just had to go. Like so many of us in life, we have so many things to do. Some of us have multiple jobs, and we power through. We've been taught to just power through, get to the other side, fake it until you can make it. So at that point, I kind of put the other guy completely in charge and let him run the show. And that's because all of my self-worth, all of my value, my validation has never come from inside of me. Historically, I have not been able to validate myself. I needed you. I needed him, her. I needed an external force to tell me, you're worthy, you're good, there's nothing wrong with you. Or, you're great at what you do, and we haven't noticed that you're fat in 10 minutes or something. I got the bright idea years ago to go from being a filmmaker, because if I'm a filmmaker, I can get compared to other filmmakers. There are other people that direct like me, and some of them direct better according to others. And naturally, if you're graded against somebody, it's easy to be judged. Epictetus, one of the Stoics, had said something to the effect of, if you want to win, enter a competition in which you are the sole contestant. I'm kind of paraphrasing that. And so at that point, I was like, oh, I will become myself for a living. My job will be me. And the other guy went from being something I would pull out and put on stage to being on 24/7. The dumb thing about making yourself your job, kids, is that the moment you wake up, you're working until the moment you go to sleep. And I burned out over time because you need a rest. Add to this my codependency. I am an incredibly, insanely codependent person. That's the people pleasing. If you need help, my hands instantly go on my hips. What can I do? I go into hero mode, hero complex mode. I can solve your problems because I can't solve mine. So it's much easier for me to focus on you. Then I don't have to think about me and my I can think about you. In that way, you tend to be somebody that people, with intention or not, use up. And we only have so many resources. I've heard that expression like, hey man, you got to fill your own cup. You got to keep the cup filled. My cup was empty. Over time, a lifetime of codependency, professionally and personally, I gave it all out and eventually ran dry until there was no sense of me left. I opened up the other guy about a month ago looking for me, for the authentic Kevin Smith, the real Kevin Smith. And I was terrified to find out that I wasn't there. There was nobody running the show. And I was scared beyond belief that either the authentic me had just off because he was so bored with what I had become and what I'd done with myself, or even worse, that the other guy had burned the authentic me for fuel to get as far as we got. And at that moment, I realized I needed help. I have never really loved myself. I abjectly loathe myself. I love the other guy. The other guy is my creation, is the creation of a 9-year-old, perfected to the point where I was able to inhabit the other guy for a living and let the other guy do everything while I sat back and watched, as a passenger in my own life. And that's not healthy by any stretch of the imagination. What they taught me at Sierra Tucson, Sean Battle, my process group therapist, who was wonderful, Dr. Falk, Kelly, they taught me to be mindful, to be in the moment, to breathe. Really comes down to just breathing, because this is a mind bender. When you breathe, you know you're here in the moment. You know you're right here and right now. You cannot breathe in the past. It's impossible. And you cannot breathe into the future. Breathing grounds you. It makes you mindful. It puts you right here. Why does one need to be mindful? Because this is fraught with peril. Because the amygdala perceives everything as a threat. You're at work and you're like, hi to somebody, and they don't say hi. Instantly, the thoughts start racing. Well, what's wrong with me? What did I do? Is that person mad at me? Sometimes just for being preoccupied. But we don't think of it that way because our minds race. Our thoughts wander because that's what thoughts do. One of the most dangerous addictions isn't alcohol, it isn't drugs. It's thinking, because we can't stop it. And most of our thoughts are negative because most of us believe the worst about ourselves, whether it's something that was said to us in childhood, somebody being like, oh, you're stupid. That's something you carry with you for the rest of your life. Like, I'm stupid. And these are things that are said to us when we're young, and they kind of shape us. And when we're at our most quiet, that's when those thoughts come in. Now, how do people still those thoughts? Many different ways. A few years back, I started smoking weed on a regular basis. At about age 38, I'd smoked weed throughout my life a couple times and was never really for me, I thought. And then at age 38, I started smoking, and I was like, well, this is great. Why isn't this for me? I mean, I made all those movies about this. I enjoy this because THC, CBD, cannabinoids, all have medicinal value to the body. I got to a point where there was never a moment where THC wasn't shifting throughout my entire system. I would wake up and smoke weed all the way until I went to bed, and I would sleep for 4 hours, and it doesn't leave your system after 4 hours. And so I'd wake up, feed it again, and the whole system would start over. So I have been numb for the better part of 10 years. Well, I've been smoking weed for 15, and I would say probably 10 of those years was me trying to be present while not being present. Weed is wonderful because unlike alcohol or some other substances, you can, in my job, in my world, I could be high as a kite and still do everything I need to do. In fact, probably do more than I could if I wasn't numb. Because when I'm not numb, I have to be alone with my own thoughts, which is some of the most terrifying places to be, alone with our own thoughts. So, oh my God, let's take on the world. Those thoughts are gone. I've suppressed them and not buried them. It's just all the negative self-talk, the constant monologue, the voice, the inner critic, all that stuff just kind of gets dulled way, way down. So metaphorically, or to use an image of sorts, I had a wound that marijuana was really good for. And I had this open wound, and I put a Band-Aid on it. That's what weed was. But the wound kept getting bigger and bigger, and then I put more Band-Aids on it, more Band-Aids on it. And by the time I walked into Sierra Tucson, I was a mummy, just covered in bandages and not really present in the real world because constantly I was numbing myself. And wait for it, I'm not going to smoke weed anymore. I know that may be disappointing to a bunch of folks. Sorry. Silent Bob should be smoking weed. He didn't when he made those movies. So he did when he was making the later movies and stuff, which could explain, yoga hosers. But I've stopped. It's been over a month since I smoked weed because I don't want to be numb anymore. When you're numb, terrible things happen when you're not present with your thoughts. And sometimes those thoughts can be treacherous, but there's ways around treacherous thinking. Being here, present in the moment. And they gave me this life hack, which is called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It is basically you talking. You have to say it out loud. And you describe your 5 senses. So you list out loud because the brain cognizes your voice better than it does your thoughts. That's why, some people talk out loud when they do tasks. That's a very effective way to get things done. You're actually informing the brain. So this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is insanely quick and very useful, and anybody could use it, and it takes you out of the past and out of the future and brings you right to the present, is as simple as this. You say it out loud. 5 things I see: the light, the camera, my hands, the floor, the ceiling. 4 things that I hear: the traffic outside in Los Angeles, my own voice, my feet, the rustling of my jacket. 3 things I smell: this room, my jacket, my breath. 2 things I taste: Cheerios, that's what I have for breakfast. My wrist, that's what I like to do. And then 1 thing I could feel, and that is the ground under my feet. And then you say out loud, you can stand down, I got this. And that's you literally talking to your amygdala and telling it that you're not in some sort of state of trauma. You're not in some sort of state or fight or flight, because that's what it's trying to do. It's assessing these horrible thoughts that you have about yourself, or thoughts, worries about the future, or you reviewing things from the past constantly, or reliving traumas. And you're reminding the amygdala that those things aren't happening right now. They're just thoughts. The more you are focused and being here rather than being here, being there, or being there. And the best place, the only place you could be, is in the moment. We miss so much of the present because we're so busy dealing with the past and so busy being worried about the future. So when I walked into Sierra Tucson, I was this hollow ghost of a human being. I told them, I was like, hey man, I see myself as a performative version of myself. I call him the other guy. And, I looked in the other day and I wasn't there anymore. So when I walked into Sierra Tucson, I was convinced that I'd stopped existing. That was my break with reality. And Sean Battle, God bless this man, paid for the whole trip simply by saying this. He was just like, the other guy would never come in here because he does everything right. And he's the one that you put out there for the world. He's the one that you feel accepts all the adulation and whatnot. So the other guy would never come here. That's how I know Kevin Smith exists, because Kevin Smith is here. And for the entire month that I was in a facility with, rubber doors on the bathroom and showers so that you can't harm yourself and whatnot, the other guy couldn't come in. There was nothing for him there. There was no way for him to sell a t-shirt or Jay and Silent Bob it, or, get up on stage and tell stories or make money. So the other guy stood down and, for lack of a better description, stood outside the gates of Sierra Tucson, while the actual me, the authentic me, went in there and worked on himself and found healing. There's healing out in the desert. One doesn't have to go to Sierra Tucson, but if you're going to go to a place, boy, I can't recommend it enough. All one has to do is take care of oneself, look into mental health. You don't have to go all the way to Arizona. Someplace near you could be very helpful. There's a process that I did a few times called EMDR. And 52-year-old me was in the room with 9-year-old me and his classmates and my teacher who said the thing. And I was able to talk to my teacher. And, I didn't ream her out or be like, you son of a, I just said this. Kelly's like, talk to her, tell her what you want to say. And I was like, this kid's not ready for that. Like, this kid has no coping mechanisms whatsoever. And so this comment is going to shape the rest of his life. More importantly, I got to talk to 9-year-old Kev, who's been frozen in a moment for 43 years, and tell him that because he didn't break that day, I was like, look, I know it's bad. And I know that you don't know why this happened, and that you're crushed and embarrassed and humiliated and split. But because you don't break in two, because you hold it together, one day we get to put our hands and our footprints in the cement at Groman's Chinese Theater. And I took 9-year-old Kev to Groman's Chinese Theater and showed him our handprints. It was a miracle. Not only did it clean up a long-standing core belief that I had about myself, it trickled down through everything, because remember, that moment shapes the rest of my life and starts cleaning up all that other stuff as well, right up into the present. It's a miracle, and they have it everywhere. You don't have to go to just Sierra Tucson. You go any place, go to Psychology Today or Psychiatry Today, and I think it's Psychology Today. And you can enter in, EMDR near me with a zip code, and you'll find a place that does it. It's absolutely miraculous and very, very healing. I went into Sierra Tucson. They were like, you got to learn to put yourself first. And I was like, that's all I do. I'm literally like, every day of my life, I wake up and I'm like, what do I want to do? And I make a thing, and they're like, Kevin, that's what you do. Who are you? Put yourself first. What do you actually like doing that has nothing to do with your job, that has nothing to do with the other guy, that has no Jay and Silent Bob in it? And I had no answers. I don't know what I like, because I don't know who I am. And now at age 52, just starting to figure it out. So one of the things that I found when I was in there was a group called CODA, which is Codependency Anonymous. There's Alcoholics Anonymous, there's Narcotics Anonymous, there's an Al-Anon and stuff. But I never felt a place in any of those communities because I didn't suffer from those afflictions. But CODA, I was forced to go to the group one day, and instantly I was like, oh, this is where I belong. Surrounded by a bunch of other people who see the world the way I do, who see themselves as so minimal and so terrible and so unworthy of love that they'll do anything to get it from somebody else. And when I was leaving Sierra Tucson, like I had 2 weeks in a row at the CODA class, they always ask somebody who wants to lead the group, facilitate, if you will. You open up the book, you read what you're doing and stuff like that. And I did that, and I loved it. I thought it was great. And right then and there, I was like, I'm going to start holding CODA meetings. Like I got my own movie theater, Smod Castle in Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey, and we're closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. So I figured on Monday nights, like 7 o'clock, I'm going to start holding CODA meetings. Man, anybody can go as long as you're codependent. And I thought about it a lot. And so did the other guy. Because the moment the other guy heard that I was gathering a crowd, he was like, all right, how do we make money off of this? How do we turn this into a business? But you can't. You can't charge fees. There are no dues. You can't make a t-shirt that says Jane Silent Bob, strike CODA or something like that. It's about anonymity as well. And right then and there, the other guy kind of off, and I realized that that's the authentic Kevin Smith. That's something that I would like to do. And now I'm going to start figuring out more of those things that's not related to what I do for a living. I'm not putting away what I do for a living. I built that other guy and I love him, but I'm going to maintain him now. He's not going to maintain me. So it was quite the experience that I had. And I'm going to wrap up by telling you like my favorite thing that happened when I was in there, other than getting healing and saving my life, which is honestly what I feel they did in there. I was in there with another patient. We can't use names, but he's a great guy. And he came from Detroit and he was sitting next to me. We're eating. It was his first day there. We were in the dining hall. And, I was engaged with everybody because that was the real Kevin Smith. I wasn't putting on a show or trying to entertain. I was just me. And so we were chit-chatting and his first day in, so nervous, maybe quiet, a little reticent to engage deep, but I kept talking to him. And finally at one point he was like, man, you know what? You remind me of that guy from the movies. And I was like, all right, here it comes, man. He's going to be like, yeah, well, I do play Silent Bob from time to time. And before I could say anything, he goes, Robert Downey Jr. And that was worth the price of admission alone. Like, I know I'm trying to figure out who I am, but having this guy say that I looked and sounded like your mannerism like Robert Downey Jr., I was like, I love Iron Man, but not as much as I love Kev. And that's what I'm going to try to do for the rest of my life. Love Kev and put him first. In that way, I don't know that you'll see much of me online anymore. This is not me, going like I'm gone forever, but I have been a creature of the internet for 27 years. I started back in 1995 trying to find out what people thought about me in interactive forums. We had a USQ message board for years before there was a Twitter, and that opened up the whole world to giving me their opinion. So it's not like I'm quitting Twitter or something like that. But if you want to see me, you'll see me live wherever I do live shows. Come to Smod Castle and watch a movie and stuff. Come see me when I'm on the road, and we'll talk. But don't look for me online, kids, because I'm going to be looking for happiness. The other side of the hardest thing it is you'll ever do in your life is your joy. And isn't that worth getting to, at least before I leave this best of all possible world? So, in conclusion, not crazy anymore. Deal with your trauma, folks. I'm dealing with mine, and it's improving my life vastly. So hopefully this information is useful to somebody. There's no, link to click to sell anything and whatnot. This is just me learning something and passing it on to people that I care about. And I care about all of you, even the ones who are like, I hate this guy. I don't hate you. I care about you. I just don't need your validation anymore. And that's good, because now we could just be friends. So there it is. Thanks for listening, everybody. Go take care of your mind.